All right, everybody. Shalom and welcome to the Yishai Fleischer Show. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter's Periscope. And we're starting the show in just another minute and a half. This is the pre-show. This is the pre-party where everybody joins up and says, hi, I'm joined by Rav Mike Feuer. Rav Mike, shalom and welcome.
Shalom Yishai. I'm actually going right now to your page to share this.
Share it away. And I definitely want to hear from everybody out there. And, of course, the first thing that we always ask is, how is the sound? And
how's it sounded, people?
In fact, Rav Mike, why don't you count from 5 down for me?
Oh, you're trying to get me to do some difficult things. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How was that?
All right, and that was really good. And here's my 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if anybody could tell me relative volumes, if they sound equalish, that would be great. And we're just about to start the show in just another few seconds. So if you have a chance, here's Lou Weiss.
Go, Lou.
Sounding great. All right, Lou, thank you so much. My man. Lou,
Sharp
thank you
ears.
so much for your help. And we are just about to begin, and we have a great Torah portion, and we also have some great issues to discuss as the world bears discussion these days.
Yeah, that's a kind way to put it.
Right? It's worth considering. It sounds like an NPR show. Worth considering.
I think you and I have a future in a show called Worth Considering.
Worth considering. It's worth considering. All right, so here we go. I see people are showing up. Here's Olivera. She says, good. Linda says, shalom from New York. And that means it's time to begin. So let's do it. Shalom,
right.
everybody. Shalom, everybody. And welcome to the Yishai Fleischer Show, broadcasting live from Judea to the world. You're a part of it wherever you are. Shalom and welcome to folks all over the world who are joining us live stream on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter's Periscope. And shalom and welcome to Rav Mike Feuer. Rav Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Shalom Yishai. It's great to see you.
Okay, and in the background right now, Erica says shalom from Sweden, and Lou says, is that from the Simpsons version of Pharaoh? That's my background. I think that is exactly right.
Looking like it.
It seemed like a menacing and yet story like Pharaoh for us. And today's show is definitely going to be about pharaohs and change of government, if you will, and dealing with speaking truth to power.
That's right, and national disasters.
National disasters and plagues, and some famous plagues, and some philosophy that's hidden all in there. But before we go on to that, I want to stop for a second and make sure that everybody knows that today's show is dedicated to Sheldon Adelson, okay? Sheldon Adelson, this 87-year-old mega Jewish magnate who passed away yesterday. And this man is responsible for being on the level, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu and others, of being on the level of Jewish philanthropy as Rothschild and as Moses Montefiore. But in any case, a man who loved the Jewish people, loved Israel. His wife, Miriam Adelson, Dr. Miriam Adelson, helped him a lot in the last few years, really dedicate money and resources and interest towards really Jewish Israeli nationalism, including the founding of this very paper, which is called Yisrael Hayom. Okay, this is Israel's leading and free and most read newspaper. Leading is a tricky word. It's actually, frankly, my favorite newspaper personally. I like it. And I have it downstairs. I get it every morning almost.
Doesn't stain the fish when you wrap it.
These Yisrael Hayoms are like everywhere in my house because I get one a day. So that's fun. But also, I wanted to say about Sheldon Adelson, just like one little vignette from Sheldon Adelson that I had to do with, was that I was actually with our mutual friend Zev in Washington, in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we were at the Venetian for the Republican Jewish Committee's convention, the RJC, in Vegas. And I've attended many Jewish conferences and many over Sabbath, including the APAC conferences. It was always hard to go to the bathroom in these big conferences because they have these electric eyes, these sensors, and they
automatic toilets.
Yeah, automatic toilets. I'm not talking Japan automatic toilets, but I am talking automatic toilets.
Well,
and that's something that you, as an Orthodox Jew, cannot activate on Shabbat.
All the bad jokes that I'm suppressing. Go ahead.
And I don't want to tell you about ways that I got around that. I really rather not discuss that at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. But what I do want to say is that when I got to the Venetian on Shabbat, the Venetian, you wouldn't think it's like a casino, for God's sakes, and you wouldn't think of it as the most Shomer Shabbat place, but it had, in the RJC pavilion there, it had Shomer Shabbat. It had little strips that said on them, little signs that said, this toilet is for Sabbath observers. Okay.
You picture everybody else in line. It's like, how come those Jews are all gig ahead every Saturday?
They were simply
Sorry, dude. You don't have to.
non-sensor toilets and non-sensor sinks. So it was just like, like the simple understanding that this man and his outlook towards Judaism was la briut. It was of great sensitivity. It was great sensitivity, and I'm just I saw in the newspaper how many organizations are tipping their hat in memory for this man, and that is a tremendous proof, a tremendous witness to the things that he's done. Prime Minister Netanyahu himself can thank Sheldon Adelson, and also the current president of the United States can also thank Sheldon Adelson for millions of dollars of investment. I did see some anti-Zionist, far-left commentators on Twitter saying this is a great day that Sheldon Adelson has died. That was an ugly kind of commentary, but it just goes to show you.
I mean, he represents the arch enemy in their eyes, and this is one of the challenges that the discourse has reached right now, is that competing visions for Am Yisrael have become enemy visions. Not to speak of the American political culture, and I pray fervently that the extremism that's kind of taken hold of the American political discourse shouldn't come to ours. But it's symptomatic. Meaning, okay, so the guy had a worldview. Many people oppose it. But to celebrate someone's death who was so dedicated to Am Yisrael it reveals many things. I'll leave it that way.
Rav Mike, do you think that that it's coincidental that this happened at the very end of the Trump presidency? Like, do you think that there was is it a scene change, or was it any way poignant, this kind of timing?
Well, I mean, poignant, no question. I mean, accidental is a question of agency and ratzon, and I'm not privy to God's plan. I mean, you can say for sure it wasn't accidental because there's no such thing. What are we meant to derive from it, and how are we meant to understand it? Well, okay, so that's in the hands of humanity, right? Like, that's kind of like Hashmayim Lashem Ha'aretz Natan Libnei Adam, right? God does what God does. The job of interpreting and building upon and really embodying belongs to us. So yeah, you could look at it as a passing of an era. You could look at it as a tragic loss. You could look at many things.
Well, tragic, it's hard to say, because at the end, he was an older man, 87 years old. That's not super old, but that's well on in years.
Actually, the tragedy wasn't for him, in my eyes. Just want to be clear, is that it might be more of a tragic loss for those whom he supported, for whom he represented a model of leadership. There's a lot of attack on the leadership of the institutions of the conservative world right now.
Right.
If you want to put President Trump in the conservative world or not, there's still a lot of an attack on it. So that's what was my intent in terms of tragic.
I just want to say that I think the last public act that I know that Sheldon Adelson did was to send his private airplane, and I think he's got a fleet, but like his private 747 to bring Jonathan Pollard home.
Yes.
Jonathan Pollard.
That's the last I'm aware of.
Yeah. Huh?
That's the last I'm aware of.
Right, but like, to me, it's like, and the last thing I'm doing is I'm sending my airplane to bring Jonathan Pollard home. That's, I don't know, very touching to me. Very, very touching to me. Very touching to me. In any case, one more time, Sheldon Adelson, a great man, a great philanthrope, philanthropist. Not philanthrope. I don't think there's a word like that. Philanthropist.
I was going to let it go.
Yeah. Did great things for Am Yisrael. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu was really honestly choked up yesterday, which was cool to see him. And yeah, a certain window has closed, and Bezrat Hashem, of course, Lo shivi im nedive amo. May God help me sit with the compassionate ones, the generous ones in the nation of Israel. He certainly was that, Sheldon Adelson, and we, B'ezrat Hashem, hope that more will rise up, more great people using funds in that way. I'm going to make an off-color type of joke. Can I make an off-color joke? Is that okay?
I'll put my fingers in my ears.
Okay, here's how it goes. This is warning. It's just meant to put a smile on your face and for a thought. So don't take it the wrong way.
Anytime you got to do that now, I hear the X is already being sharpened.
No, you know how
Go ahead, it's your neck. Stick it out, dude.
Stick
it out.
People flip out at everything today. So here's what I want to say. I told this to my kids. I said, look, when the enemies of Israel, when the Gentiles who become enemies of Israel want to take our money, so they kill us and they pillage us and they destroy us and they burn the synagogues and they take the stuff and they loot and who knows what they do, like, and they send people on trains and all kinds of stuff. When the Jewish people are like, we want to recoup some of that money back, we make casinos and we say, come in, have some fun. Nobody's going to get hurt here. Just, play a game, pay a little money. Everything is going to be fine.
But the house always wins.
But the house wins, exactly. It's a kinder, gentler way of recouping some
of fleecing your enemies.
Yeah. Is that okay, or was that too?
So let's get to the parsha, man.
Okay, here we go. Good call. All right, we have a Torah portion, which is the second Torah portion in the book of Exodus, and it's really the face to face with between Moses, Aaron, and Pharaoh. It's the mano a mano. It's the showdown. And before the showdown, there's going to be yet another kind of overview, and God really lays out to Moses a vision of what the story is really all about, and that's these kind of promises that God makes at the beginning. Very, very moving, I think. And basically, he starts off by saying, My name is the Tetragrammaton. I am Hashem. I am the name. However, I did not reveal myself. I revealed myself to the forefathers and mothers in a different name, which is El Shaddai, which is, I think, the God of fertility, the God of personal success, but not yet a national success. But however, I am revealing myself to you in this name. Now, we're always surprised about that because that other name that God is revealing himself, the kind of four-letter name, the Tetragrammaton, it does mention it by the forefathers. But God says, not really. I really actually showed up through this thing called Kel Shakai, which is this name of I don't know how to explain it. But I didn't reveal to them this. I'm revealing this to you for the mission.
Yeah, I mean, the word "reveal" I think is what's causing trouble in the understanding here. I think you should just go with the word that the verse uses. Is Ve'el Avram Yitzchak Yaakov El Shaddai. Right? I appeared to Avram Yitzchak and Yaakov as this name El Shaddai. Ushmi Hashem, the four-letter name, Lo Nodati Lahem. Lo Nodati. Nodati is a very important word because it's not Lo Hodati. It's not that I didn't make it known, like you're saying. They knew. Avram called. He called B'Shem Hashem. He called on God's. Below Nodati Lahem. It's a nifal. I wasn't actually known to them, which is why I really think that Rashi's explanation is quite important for understanding what's happening here. So Rashi points out is that I hear what you're saying about the God of fertility, but to Rashi, El Shaddai is the God who makes promises.
Who makes?
God who makes promises.
Mm-hmm. Makes
promises. And it says, listen, I'm going to give you the land. Going to have lots of kids. It's going to be great. Right? And according to Rashi, the four-letter name of God is the name that refers to God's both justice in terms of punishing the wicked, but also generosity in terms of actually rewarding the righteous. Meaning, it's the God of the follow-through, so to speak. Right? And what's happening here is God is basically chastising. Don't forget, what led up to this was Moshe saying, Lama Hariota. Right? As we spoke about a little bit last week, Moshe's challenged by holding the process. In general, Moshe's challenged by holding the process. And in many ways, it's reflective of his very high level that he is, because he just sees the truth and he changes himself accordingly. And he's challenged by those that don't. So when the process doesn't immediately take off the way it ought, when he confronts Pharaoh and says, listen, we're talking about God here. And Pharaoh says, what do I care? Makes things worse. So Moshe's response is to turn to God and say, why'd you make it worse? Like, I don't understand. God says, listen, you should know I'm relating to you as a follow-through of a promise which has been going for hundreds of years. You're witnessing the end of a process, Moshe, and you want to hurry it along. It doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
But know that I am indeed nodati lecha, even though that's not the way it says, but I will be known to you as as Shem Avaya. You will see the fulfillment of my promises. I will give you the Torah. And at this point, at least, it looks like he would have seen the land, although that's not entirely clear even here.
I see that God gives really 10 things that God will do. I remembered. I will bring them out. I will save them. I will take them out. I will redeem them. I'll take them. I'll bring them to the land. And I'll give them the land. And I'll do everything. And basically, out of this long list, a litany of things that God's like, here's what I'm responsible for. The one thing that he asks us to do is v'yada'atem, and you shall know. That's really the job of the Jewish people. It's like, I will do the stuff, but you've got to recognize who's done it. Because I'm invisible, so I need you to be the recognizer of these things. Okay, that's your job.
And one could say it's the purpose of creation. I mean, you go beyond the immediacy of the narrative and what's happening in Egypt right now, which makes sense, right? But it's actually the purpose of creation. God created the world in order to be known. And not from an informational standpoint, but all the intimacy of Adam Yadat Chava Ishto, that the man knew his wife in that biblical sense, that intimacy of relationship, which actually produces something new in creation. That's why God created the world and gave us this ability to know. So this is just a turning point in that process. And it's getting bigger from here.
You know, as you were saying that about God knowing us and we're knowing God, I looked into my camera, who was just sitting in front of me, and behind the camera I see the hills of Judea, and it just got this feeling like, you know, that God is looking at us in the land, and then I'm looking out and trying to see him, and the reason the camera reminded me of that is because of that verse, Ein be'ein yira'eh el Hashem b'tzion. We will see God, he will be revealed to us eye to eye here in Zion. And that's just like you sometimes you look into that eye. How many times have I looked into the eye of the camera? And sometimes you can, if you want, you could, imagine that God's always looking at you, and that's really the eye that's upon us.
Well, listen, in front of God, you're live 24/7.
That's right. That's right. And then there's a magic word in this week's Torah portion. The magic word. There's actually, in my mind, which one? What's the one?
Please.
That's the magic word for the kids. In this case, it's I will bring you to the land that I promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Venatati ota lachem Morocha. I will give it to you as a Morocha. What's a Morocha? It's a camp. There's camps named Morocha. Yeah. But the word Morocha means an inheritance, an internal inheritance, an inheritance that you can't kind of give away, something that is non-fungible, kind of. You can't.
Well, it's important in English to recognize that an inheritance shares, at least to some degree, a meaning with the idea of something which is inherent. Mm-hmm. Right? When you inherit something, it's not the same as purchasing it. Even though legally we could say that either way it's your possession. But right. I'll ask you very simply: if I own a camera and you want to buy it from me, until you buy it from me, whose camera is it?
Yours.
Right. But if you're going to inherit a house from a relative, when that relative, Ad May Stream, leaves the world, right? Whose house is it while that relative is still in the world?
Their relatives?
Yeah, but it's also yours, not yet. You understand? Meaning the purchase, I could decide to sell, I could not. But the idea of an inheritance is it's actually your intergenerational birthright. It is, and therefore, to some degree, inherent in your possessions, though it may not be actualized. And obviously, it gets more complicated. But you understand the difference? And that's why this idea of Morocha is so important. Moshe the Kilat Yaakov, like Moshe will say much later in Sefer Dvarim, right? That about the Torah, that there is something which is an intergenerational selfhood, which we receive and pass on.
That's right. That's right. And you recommended I read this book by Yoram Chazoni called The Virtue of Nationalism. And one of the things that he says, he's like, what is it that keeps us in bonds of a state together? And it's a whole book about really that, which is what creates a state. And he says, really, the state is a big family. And he says a family is not just about some economic interests. It's really, and getting married and having children is not just about, passing on economic interests. It's really about shared values.
That's for sure not.
Right.
Sorry, I just paid my taxes. So I can tell you, they'll be lucky.
There's values that are passed on, and I think that's what you're saying. That there's values that are that they're not at any given time, any one generations. They're being passed on all the time, like a slinky.
Yeah, but I want to be more clear. It's bigger than that because it's beyond the possession of what's being passed on. The very fact that it's inheritance is one of its values. You understand me? It's an intergenerational reality.
Right.
So part of the value is that if I inherit, I aim to, that's why you could say I inherit, but I also inherit too, meaning it's the same word, right? I inherit from and I can inherit to my children, even though it's not the way the word's generally used, right? That's part of the value.
And also you mentioned that this word is really used twice in the whole Torah here and with regarding to the
Maybe
Torah
use
itself.
it more often, but in these two places were prominent in my mind.
No, there's no other place the word Morocha. That's in the Torah. That's how it appears. That's it.
Okay, makes sense then.
Right, and Baal Torah mentions that, and that's it. It's like, and then the rabbis go for a whole thing about it, which is like, these are things that they say, don't say Morocha, say Me'orasa, say you're engaged to it. We're engaged to the land of Israel, we're engaged to the Torah. And other people say, no, it's that the Torah and the land of Israel, they're engaged to one another. They are things that, and if you think about it, maybe land of Israel is feminine, and the Torah, which is the word of God, is masculine. And when they fuse together, that is like a marriage of something that has fertility. The Torah, which is the way that God wants us to live our life, and the land of Israel, the place where God wants us to live our life, the closeness to him comes from the fusion of those two things.
Yeah, I mean, they're both primary vessels for our divine relationship. There's no question.
Okay,
the third together with them is the lived historical experience of Am Yisrael, our story.
Which is the Morocha.
Ideally, right, which is ideally when the two of them work together. Yes,
that's right. So the word for today, everybody, is Morocha. Morocha, eternal inheritance. Morocha.
Word for the day.
Word of the day is Morocha. Everybody just go. I want you to go all day. Just be like Morocha, Morocha. Just walk around and be like, the land of Israel, the Torah of Israel. These are Morocha, which God thinks is. He kind of gives us a hint of Me'orasa. We're engaged to it. It's engaged to one another. These are the things. All right.
And in that light, I'll throw one last activist thought at you. There's a phrase which is attributed to many people, et cetera. It doesn't really matter to me who said it, but it's common in the environmental world. That it's important to remember that that the environment is not something we inherit from our parents, but rather that we borrow from our grandchildren. Right? Meaning that if you really believe that what you receive is intergenerational trust, then the way you treat it is not simply as a possession which you've received, but one which you are borrowing from the future. And Torah and the land of Israel the same way. So don't treat them as some sort of gift that you've received, but rather as a responsibility to delve into and create and build up in order to pass on.
Okay, can I just ask you one question out of kind of left field related to this thing? I've been reading a little bit more about a concept of generational intelligence. Mm-hmm. That really IQ is not an individual measurement, but it's really like what is known at the time. How are people thinking at a time? And I was thinking a little bit about this, about the idea of we live in a very interconnected world, in a networked world, and our minds today are in some ways more networked. But on the other hand, do you ever think to yourself, instead of being smart for me, what is the smartness in this room? What is the smartness in this region? What is the smartness in my country? What is the smartness on this globe? Is there a generational intelligence, a big mind that is like all these little computers coming together to work like a cray supercomputer? And is there a way to access that? Is there a way to access and to think along those lines, or is it just my role to either influence that generational wisdom or knowledge? Or do I just work as just an individual and forget that stuff?
That's a great question. And to me, it's actually one of the central drivers in my project of the Jewish story, to be honest with you, because I wouldn't use the word smartness, because smartness leans us toward very specific measures of achievement. Right? You mentioned IQ, meaning you can measure intelligence quotients, emotional intelligence, they're into all kinds of social intelligence, but it all depends on the standard of measure you use in order to test. And therefore, to some degree, all you're proving is that you can achieve a test, right? But what I hear you asking is, wait, isn't there some sort of wisdom in the room? Meaning, isn't there something which is emergent out of any collective, be it the globe, be it intergenerational? Yeah, you still with me? Because I lost your picture.
I'm here.
Okay,
I just my camera
that's
got
fine.
unplugged for a
So I
second.
want to I'll finish my answer quickly. So I would call that consciousness. That there's a particular depth of consciousness which can be articulated in a room, in a classroom, amongst a nation, and as a people. And in reality, it's how I understand the specific task of the Jewish people. Is that we have to be simultaneously connected to enough of the world and yet deeply grounded enough in our own narrative that we can give voice to the consciousness of creation. Ultimately is our task. That's, and so if you look in our,
How does one plug into that? Is like I thought to
so
myself, like even on the level of meditation, is there a way to like just meditate and sense the flow, the thought of a generation?
my tool is narrative.
Let me just do a follow-up question with that, which is in a time of deep divisiveness of the kind that I don't think the people my age have ever seen.
No.
Is there any more, like, is it left brain, right brain, that there's such a split, or was that always the case?
Listen, the tool in my eyes is not so much meditation for a Jew, although it's a powerful tool, it's an important tool, but rather prayer. Mm-hmm. Right? Because and I mean, when I say prayer, I mean specifically the liturgy, like the depth of traditional Jewish prayer, because its structure is a narrative structure which is meant to bind the pieces of creation together, right? And prayer is the sort of activist stance of taking the past and making it conscious in the present in order to orient toward the future you want, right? You're telling a story about the past in the present with your present needs, and you're mingling them and asking God, this is what the future could look like. Please, this is what I want the future to look like. You're trying to actually sort of like turn that corner, so to speak. And it's a very important practice in prayer in light of the last thing you said about the divisiveness of the world. At the end of the Shemona Esrei, at the end of the 18 blessings, we talk about in Sim Shalom, right? Sim Shalom tov v'rachachem v'chatzarachim alin v'al kol Yisrael amecha. Right? So put, give peace and blessing and all good things to all of your people, Israel. That's a very important place to pause. And literally to picture every kind of Jew. And if you want, every kind of non-Jew. You can really picture the whole world because we are particular in service of the world, right? So to practice actually picture when you say Kol Amcha Yisrael, all the people, not just the ones that look like us, not just the ones whom we agree with. And then ultimately, in addition to that's the grounding of ourselves in ourselves, of our particular narrative, and then to just try to understand the story of the world. There's part of the world which is deeply human and shared. There are narratives that are national. There are global factors which we know today better than any others. And all I can say is this is what I spend my nights and days doing. That and reading fantasy and science fiction in order to cool my brain. But
the Torah portion is filled with a recurring phrase. It appears like 3 times in the Torah portion and in the previous one as well, which is Moses is like, how is Pharaoh going to hear me? And I have uncut lips, imperfected lips. I am arel svatayim. I have
uncircumcised lips. Yeah.
Right. And that's like a recurring theme. I don't think we talk a lot about that. But there's something in Moses that he keeps on saying, like, I'm not the right man for the job because of this thing. Now, it's come out throughout the ages that's a way of talking about Moses being a stutterer. I never felt comfortable with that. I don't feel comfortable with the idea. I don't see that and is said in any clear way. It says that he says about himself, they're not, shall we say, they're not circumcised. They're like rough. And one of the things I understand about Moses is that he really is a straight talker. Remember, I think it was John McCain who used to have that straight talk express. Remember that? Like, I feel like that's what it is. Moses has this straight talk express. And God says to him, but I'm going to send you the diplomat. That diplomat is Aaron. He is going to be the person who is going to help you craft that message in the craft message kind of way.
Well, and one of the dynamics that God actually sets up between them is that you will be to Pharaoh as Elohim, and Aaron will be your prophet. I mean, I'm looking right here, and I'm in the beginning of the 7th chapter. First line, after Moshe, once again, as you pointed out, repeatedly protests that he's aral sfatayim. It says, "Vayosh Hashem el Moshe." God says to Moshe, "Reina taticha Elohim leParo." I've made you. Now, Elohim's a funny word in biblical Hebrew. It could be God, or it simply could just be the powers that be. which is really the best translation of Elohim. You know, I mean, God can be the powers that be, or in Pharaoh's world, you know, the big king is. But either way, notice the line. He's going to be your Navi. Here's your proof that Moshe is not a stutterer. In Rashi, when he says you're going to be shofet v'rodeh, right, meaning you're gonna have the power to judge and punish, and Aaron's going to be your Navi. He says miturgamecha, you're a translator. He says king kol lashon nevuah adam machriz mashmiya la'am. All the language of a Navi means a person who announces and sort of makes known to the people the words of judgment and rebuke which are coming. Meaning, Moshe, in this sense, is just like God. God does not beat around the bush. You know, right? The divine word in its truth is always razor sharp. Right? We also seek divine mercy in the way we receive it, in the way we attempt to integrate it, in the way we understand it, which is also a divine attribute. But the word itself is sharp. Words are sharp. That's why they have power. It's also why they can damage, right? And so Moshe, when he says "Ani aras fatayim," I really agree with you that he's not a smooth talker.
Right, not a smooth talker. And we even saw that when he says to the two Israelites are hitting one another.
Russia.
And he says, "Hey, evil guy, why are you hitting your brother?" It's like, I'm not going to waste my time. Here's the truth. Here's what I see. Yeah. You're evil. You're good. I'm going to call you evil. Yeah, or wicked. You're the wicked one in this case. And there's something about Moses which is unrefined in that sense, or let's just say not genteel, not with no airs and no diplomacy. Now, diplomacy is not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a way to it's the spoonful of sugar that makes the medicine go down.
It's more than that, though, because remember, Am Yisrael stands in the place of Aaron when it comes to the relationship between God and creation. Our job, we received the Torah. We got Torah at Moshe. Now we're Aaron. Our job isn't just to, spoonful of sugar so the medicine will go down. Here, nations of the world, take this. Our job is to actually be a bridge. And remember, a bridge touches ground on both sides of the river. We must actually be able to stand where the nations of the world are and understand what this word means to them. What it is saying to them, what it can bring out from them. Not just what we think it ought to be or what God really intended. That's on our side of the river. That's our job. But on their side of the river, it's like, well, but what does this actually mean to you? And in order to do that, I actually have to be able to stand in your place, which is why Aaron was the great peacemaker. He was able to truly see competing perspectives and then understand, going back to your earlier question about uniting the world, to understand that there are different perspectives on the same word. There's only one word.
At the same time, my theory is that when these two forces are separated, when the truth of Moses is separated from the kindness or diplomacy of Aaron, that's when things go bad. Case in point is the golden calf. When Moses, the man of truth, goes up to heavens, the people say, "Oh, truth doesn't want to come down and hang out with us ruffians. It doesn't want to come down to the bar. It doesn't want to be down here." And so
in the relativistic postmodern world,
right? It doesn't want that. It wants, it's boshesh laret min har. It refuses to come down. It's embarrassed to come down to our level. And then they turn to Aaron and they say, "Let's sin, let's party." And instead of he is not a man of harsh truth. He's a man of diplomacy, so he's trying the whole time
to work with where they're at.
Right, to work with it and to round the corner to make it as best as possible. But so therefore, the real sin there, in my opinion, was the split between Aaron and Moses. When you split those two up, when you leave the people to themselves and the truth to so it was like Aaron is low, Moses is high, and when those
who's going to hold the people together? And think about it. There are many Jews in the world today for whom our own side is still prominent, but they've let go of Torah Moshe. And what happens then is that the Jew becomes everything to everybody that they think those other people want them to be. Notice the difference is that if I'm anchored in Torah and yet I'm still engaged with the world, then I'm trying to figure out what does the Torah mean to you. In order to do that, I have to figure out who you are. What do you actually need? I unanchor myself from Torah, but I'm still trying to figure out you and what do you need. But all I'm figuring out is how I fit into that. Right. You understand? How can I be what you need? How can you follow? And that's unfortunately what happens when you split those two powers. I agree with you 100%. And I think it's an important reading when we get to the golden calf, we should come back to it. It's an important reading of that story.
Okay, now God is going to say, I want you to go to Pharaoh and I want you to do my wonders.
Yes.
Okay?
Bring
And
on Cecil B. DeMille.
that's right. And um, um, so Pharaoh says, the first sign, we actually read the first of the signs on Passover night, we think is the blood. But the truth is, the first sign is the snake.
Yeah, it's the sort of warning shot. We'll call it the warning
It's
shot.
the warning shot, which is, and I don't think it's given the fair dramatic value that it is, because Moses they kind of do it quickly in Prince of Egypt. Moses throws down a staff, it becomes a snake. Like, can you imagine a cobra, a big one,
Anaconda.
right? And then the sorcerers of Pharaoh, they do the same thing, but then Moses' staff swallows up their snakes.
Yes, I love the diuk in the Mishnah that it actually turns back into a staff first and then swallows the snakes.
That's interesting.
But that's the real impressive. Like, okay, one snake swallows another snake, fine, but a staff swallowing a bunch of snakes,
Right.
that's cool.
And the Baal Turim says that later on, when way later on, when Aaron and the other tribe heads put in their staffs into the temple of the tent of meeting, that again this staff swallowed up the other staffs, and when they came in, there was no other staff, so it had to cough up the other staffs. Yeah. So sometimes these images they're powerful, though. They're very powerful images. But that's the first warning shot, which is like, and to me it's very important because I believe that Pharaoh's dreams originally meant, I will swallow up the Jewish people.
Yes, we've spoken about it, yeah.
Right, and here comes Moses' snake, and it's like, no, bro, no, we're going to swallow you up here. And indeed, the Jewish story swallowed up in the end of time.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. I mean, I hate to keep harping on the Jewish story, but it is my sort of every waking hour occupation. Is it precisely it? I mean, who would know who this Pharaoh was anymore if it weren't for our story?
Right, that's right.
Who would remember Nebuchadnezzar?
Right.
If we hadn't recorded him for all time. And ditto, probably most people, Titus's siege of Rome. I'm sorry, siege of Jerusalem, which was in certainly Achashverosh, Mela, right. And look, the world is trying as hard as they can to forget Hitler, or at least to make him irrelevant by everyone you don't like as a Nazi.
That's right. See Arnold.
Which should not be ignored as a form of Holocaust denial. I know. Listen, the Schwarzenegger thing, on one hand, because of the desire he had to obviously expiate some sense of personal familial guilt. So, like, I get that emotive moment, but it was despicable to compare what happened in the Capitol, as horrible it was, and I'm momish crying for the Union. But to compare that to Kristallnacht, that was the opening round of the tertiation, as Begin used to like to be careful to say, of our people, that a third, not a decimation, a tenth. It just shows the fact that all these wonderful Jews out there were crowing about how I never liked him. He's a Republican governor, but at least now he gets it. And There was
and it was weird with that Austrian accent also. It made it like it was. I almost felt bad for the. It just made me feel bad, and to see such a warping of stories and conflagration of stories. Stories are very fungible today, and you could kind of like.
But that's why you and I have chosen the primary battlefront of our time, which for Israel has always been the primary battlefront. It's the narrative war which must be fought.
That's right.
Mamish, on land, sea, on the beaches, in the homes, in the fields, just like Churchill said after Dunkirk. And like, at the risk of getting on a soapbox, everybody listening right now needs to realize that they are not free to desist from this war.
That's right.
Right.
No, if you choose to desist, you have fallen victim to it. If you have made the calculation that talking about it is not costly, it's not beneficial, you have been bullied. You have been terrorized. If you don't feel comfortable saying your truth anymore, That's a problem. By the way, I just want to tell you, I've been reflecting a lot. You know, this time bears reflection, as we said before. I've been reflecting a lot about my past few years. You know, during the last 4 years, during the Trump era, I did a lot of traveling to America. I spoke to a lot of people. I went to a lot of places, and I remember that I was in a conservative synagogue on Long Island, and I spoke to on the Sabbath, which was unusual. I remember that you know, I talked about what I thought were positive Trump policies, and I kept trying to tell people this is not about the cult of personality. It's about these policies. That's what this is about. It's what's important to me. But people would come up to me and say, "I support Trump," in a hushed voice, and I said, "Why are you talking to me in a hushed, secretive voice?" And they said, "Well, you can't talk about that around here." And I was just like, I shrugged it off. I thought it was meaningless. Today, I realize there is some kind of fear out there for people. I am not talking about being pro or against President Trump. That is not the topic of what I'm saying. I'm talking about a sense of inequality of conversation, an inability to express yourself, an inability to tell your truth. Once you're afraid of that thing, you're certainly going to be afraid of standing up for Israel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Wow. We are living in a time of thought suppression and thought fear.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, I want to sort of like break postmodern for a moment, just point out there's always been a question of who controls the discourse.
Right.
Right? It is a real source of power. What's happened in the last 4 years is that a number of things came to light. First of all, the attempt to sort of to control the discourse by the liberal center to make America a happy, equal country in the minds of many people, particularly African Americans, had failed. Not, okay, rightly or wrongly, just in their minds. And there was a lot of anger exploded in the riots and protests around, in last summer. So that's one of the pieces. But the other pieces here is that how to say it. The nature of social media is just so self-absorbed and self-reflected that people began to lose sight of the fact that there was an edge to the discourse at all. You understand? That the echo chamber phenomenon made them think like, okay, this is the only thing which is possibly real. There is no other side to this story. You know, there's no other, perspective here, not one that's legitimate. And this is why, by the way, the calling one's enemies Nazis has become almost like a ritual act, because still 75 years later, in America, the one thing you don't get to be is a Nazi, right? Like I don't know if you've seen those memes of people juxtaposing like the pictures of some of the rioters that broke into the Capitol building with like neo-Nazi paraphernalia, right? And people with the memes that say, like, you don't get to be a loyal American and a Nazi at the same time. We literally fought a world war over this, which on one hand is funny, like, it's true we did. On the other hand, but did you see what's happening there? It's an attempt to say, no, that's not the other side of a discourse. There's not a different perspective on this, which is then by nature needs to be, to some degree, engaged with. No. This is beyond the pale. Before, it was an unself-conscious, oftentimes privilege-based, just who owns the media, who owns the government, etc. But now it's an activist because of social media. It's brought this ugly edge. I know I'm rambling, but just I feel this pain because I'm constantly trying to tell a story in which everyone can find themselves. Mm-hmm. And what I'm encountering more and more is that people treat that as an attempt to control them and gain power, as opposed to an honest belief that indeed we are all one people.
That's what I was saying before. I'm not sure that there is a generational intelligence when it's a house divided. It's a house divided against itself. And lastly, and we got to get back to the Torah portion, but I feel like it's all related. But lastly, I sometimes feel, and I've been feeling this for years, is that like there are people who are gaining a lot from our pain and our division.
Yes, always.
Right, and like sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, this guy hates me and I hate him, and we're fighting, we're calling each other's names, but since we're on this other guy's platform the whole time, he's just laughing all the way to the bank.
Outrage is a commodity right now.
Right. They even have a name for it. They call it outrage porn.
Yep.
And yeah, and so like, yeah, you got to fight for your side, but there's a place, and so therefore I will now ask for the world to listen to me as I say, let's take a deep breath. Okay, let's take a deep breath, and just have a little bit of that empathy for even the other side. I have empathy for the other side. Some of my family is the other side, and I do want to say one thing, which I'm writing about right now, which is with regard to President Trump. You could feel that he has failed you. You could feel that he's a flawed person and all that. But one thing I could say, and within the confines of this show, you could be safe. This is a safe space to say that, which is, one cannot take away the incredible progress that Israel and the Middle East has had under this administration.
Yeah.
And you could separate. I give you permission to separate the man that you may have a problem with, or may not. But many people do. Separate that from the achievements, because the achievements are for countries and for nations and for millions of people, and they are real achievements. Ask the UAE, ask average Israelis. We are more secure today and in a different place, and many lies were frontally attacked and taken down, at least for a short time. And so there was a beautiful window of light, and there's no reason, just because you may be unhappy with the personality of the leader, don't forget the great achievements. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as you know, I've always been wary of President Trump as a personality since his campaign. I've really been unable to get behind him as a human being. Almost, there's certain problems there, but the shifts in our region are undeniable. And what I hope is that we will do honor to whatever. You can say it was his ego, you can say it was all self-interest, you can say it was God acting through, I don't really care, but that we will do honor to those achievements by picking up this ball and running with it. Because we're in a position to lead this region, or we're in a position to swirl back down into chaos when the United States shifts its posture. But whatever we do, we need to pick up the ball and run with it.
That's right. And also, if we feel the need to detach the personality from the achievements, there's another way to do it. There was an amazing team. There was a dream team here. There's a dream team here, and like, give honor to that. There was the classy and honorable Mike Pence. There was that sharp and kind of quick and ambitious Mike Pompeo with his name, which is practically the same name as the first Roman general who came into the land of Israel. You had David Friedman, he's going to go down as a historic figure. Going to go down as a historic, like street names will be named after him. Like, this man did stuff that never happened before, especially finally the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which is probably the biggest thing of them all. And then there were others. There was that Kushner Ivanka, a power couple thing that like shuttle diplomacy around the Arab countries and got this Orthodox Jew from Livingston, New Jersey, got the Saudis and the Emiratis to be like, yeah, Israel's cool. They could fly over and stuff, and so giant, unbelievable changes. And I think it's a mistake to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think there's some people that want us to throw the baby out with the bathwater so they can make policy changes. We should not let them block that instinct, and also do what you said, which is run with the ball forward.
Great. I got no argument with that.
Great. Let's keep going.
Let's go on the tour. We got another 10, 15 minutes
That's
here.
Right. That's right.
The rest of life will overtake me.
Let's talk about the plagues.
Yes.
Let's talk
this
about
is the good
the
stuff.
plagues. Okay, plagues are like bunker busters from the era. Yeah, they're like these things. They're coming down at you. First
weapons of mass destruction.
That's right, and also weapons of mass narrative, because those stories of these plagues is the first thing that kids kind of learn. Dam, the Nile turns to blood. Tzfardea, the frogs that are in your bed. Pharaoh, the frogs that are in your oven. The frogs that are coming out, and frogs are like Jewish people. On the one hand, they're these like.
You didn't just call the Jewish people vermin, did you?
Well, they're in the sense that the frog is soft and not necessarily the hardest of characters on an individual level, but like, and by the way, frogs. This is an interesting factoid. frogs only live where water is pure, where water is clean.
Yes.
And there's something about the Jewish people that's like that also. But then, but then when there's like a mass infragation, okay, then you know what I mean? These soft little cutesy
You're
things.
just digging deeper and deeper, my friend. You went from calling the Jewish people vermin to in mass infrogation.
Yeah,
I can't get the idea that the wholeness of the people has its power.
Yes, that's what I meant to say. And they will get in your kishkas. They will get in your kishkas when the Jewish people want something.
They'll be everywhere.
Yeah, and that's especially true, by the way, about freedom of religion and about the land of Israel. And like just we said before, Morocha, like Torah. When you start blocking us from Torah, we'll go at you like a minion of frogs. And if you try to stop us from coming to the land of Israel, we'll jump off those boats and swim ashore and set up shop because this is our land. That's just the way it is.
I think you should let the metaphor go now.
Sometimes I even tell my enemies in debate, I'm like, you understand, you're not going to stop us because we're nuts about this. We're coming home. There's nothing. When we decide that, when God flips that toggle switch, it's over. That's what we're doing.
Right.
It's not gonna be stopped. Even if you squish a frog, God forbid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just letting the frog thing go.
Okay, Dam Sfardea. Tell me. Speaking of frogs, why does it say that the frogs were like, like in New Jersey when it snows, and it snows in like January, but sometimes at the malls there are these snow piles that stay all the way to beginning of May.
They're called urban glaciers. Yes, I grew up in
urban glaciers.
In the corner of parking lots covered in soot, and you're like, is that a pile of gravel? And then you scratch at it and you realize there's water leaking out from underneath. Yeah, urban glaciers. Sure.
Why does the Torah tell us that there was an urban frog glacier?
Or that they were piled up in heaps and heaps and that they rotted?
Yeah.
I mean, on some level, my answer to that is because the Torah was meant to be a story that was told and made an impression, and that's indeed a very you wouldn't forget that piles of rotting frogs. Like there's an image that's gonna stick. There's some things you can't unsee, like they say, right? But I think also if we're gonna sort of be a little bit more metaphorical or midrashic for a second, is that it's indicative of the failure that underlies Egypt, which God is attempting to break through, which is that life could be massified in that way. That slavery was about, the Midrash says that Pharaoh was using young children when they ran out of mortar to use their flesh and blood to stick the stones of the buildings together, right? The individual life had no meaning to Pharaoh. He was master of the world and everything served him. There was a mass of humanity. And this sort of like that symbol of the piles of life rotting, right, is an important message which is being given to Pharaoh. It's like, do you see where the problem lies? Yeah.
And I though you warned us not to conflate the Holocaust with other things, there is an evocation of that image of the piles of Jews. Those are if you've ever seen those images from the Holocaust, those are the most powerful images when you're like, how could these holy and good people their bodies be tractored and then piled into piles? And it's impossible to understand. And there's an image of that. There's an image of that here to out what Pharaoh was really doing.
And the flip side of that question is, how could those people driving the tractors who look like human beings be doing that? Mm-hmm. And that was my point. That's the message to Pharaoh. Okay, is that everyone's created in the image of God, but I do believe that you can destroy that within you.
Mm-hmm. Very good. There's also the wild animals. Right? The Arov. There's the wild animals.
Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my.
Which is basically the things that you depended on are out of control.
Yep. World out of control.
World out of control. Like imagine like a virus.
Yeah.
Escaping from a laboratory somewhere.
In China.
And then we have.
There's a story that'll never catch on, huh?
Which one?
The Wuhan virus.
Yeah, it's a very catchy story. We'll hear more about that. I'm telling you, these days, forget television. Real life is like way way more exciting television.
But I got to tell you that my brother, he should be healthy and well. He writes for the Times. He's been telling me that for decades, literally. He's just been telling me, he's like, the problem with writing, he stopped writing fiction. You see, he started off, he wanted to be a fiction writer. He stopped because he said, we just can't compete with the real world anymore. That was 20 years ago.
That's a good one. Then we have also shchin, which are boils.
Well, you skipped the lice, by the way. But
I skipped the lice. The lice.
It's a little bit too close to home here in Israel.
That's right. Kids here have from time
Although
to time lice.
one of the benefits of our children never going to a schoolroom, and even when they do, staying 1.5 meters away from each other.
That's right.
It's much of the lice don't do that 2 meter distance thing too easily.
That's right. Yeah.
Go.
I want to live.
Yeah, exactly.
We face lies and lice. Those are the things that we're challenged with. Lies and lies. But I do want to, in the last few minutes that we have, I just want to talk about one of the verses in this Torah portion which I find very, very evocative and interesting, and that is actually chapter 9, verse 16. Chapter 9, verse 16. Okay?
Yeah.
Actually, just a little bit before that, God is kind of addressing Pharaoh and through Moses, and he says, "This time I am sending my plagues right to your heart and to your servants and to your people, so that you will know there is none like me in the land."
Once again, your whole point is all about knowing God.
Right. Ki ata shalachti et yadi. Now I'm going to send my hand. Ve'ach, and I'm going to strike otcha ve'et amcha, you and your nation. Badever. What's dever?
Daver.
What is that?
Plague. Pestilence.
Pestilence. What is pestilence anyway?
It's an animal disease.
Like
hoof and mouth or something.
Right, hoof and mouth, right. V'tikached min haaretz, you'll be taken away from the land. And here's the verse.
Extinguished.
V'ulam ba'avur zot hamadaticha. However, I just want to say something to you, Pharaoh. This is why I created you. Ba'avur harotcha et kochi. I have created you so I could show you my strength. Leman saper shmi b'chol haaretz. So that my name will be told in story form in the whole land, in the globe, in the world.
I want to tighten your reading.
Go
It
ahead.
doesn't say why I created you. It says Alam Burzeh He'emadeticha. I've held you up.
Right.
Picture like the prize. Yeah, well, exactly. Picture the prize fighter in the ring who gets his opponent on the ropes and like almost holds him up to set up that moment. And he says, "Now watch this."
Right.
Boom. Like that's what I always picture when I read the Hemadetik. I've been holding you up, says God. Truth is, you should have gone down long ago. And you thought that it was the grace of God holding you up. Well, it was God holding you up, but not by grace.
But this is a very first thing. Here's an interesting thing. This word ve'ulam, which means however, appears 4 times in the Torah. 4 times in the Torah. 2 times by Jacob. One time it says the place was named Luz. The place he called the place Beit El, but it was actually Luz beforehand.
Right.
So that was Vulam. However, the other time is when Jacob is blessing Joseph's 2 sons. So he says, however, this son will be greater than this son. Right. He crosses his hands and he says, I know, my son, I know, but however, the real thing is this. So both times Jacob kind of like reveals a hidden thing. Here, God says to Pharaoh, it looks like you said, like you're propped up because of your own strength, maybe, or because of my grace, like you said. But really, I kept you up here, or really, another way to read it is the whole story of Egypt is so that I can tell my tale, show my powers.
Oh yes.
And therefore, he's actually saying to us, hey, Jewish people, the reason you went down to Egypt into exile is so that I could reveal the story of God.
Listen, I can't resist in that light just asking American Jewry to think about what story they're aiming to tell. Right? Meaning you and I jumped ship a long time ago, so it's pretty easy to tell on one level what story we're looking to tell, right? But those who really who intend to stay, not the ones who are challenged by the realities of life, and yet your heart is here. The ones who say no, like American Jewry belongs in America. This is where we are. This is where we're from. This is where we'll stay. Okay. But American empire won't last forever, just like no empire before it did. And this might be that we're living through what I see to be the other side of the hill, so to speak. It's time to start asking that question. What is the story that you will tell out of this?
You reminded me that many years ago I came up with an idea for Aliyah to Israel. Aliyah's immigration to Israel. So we come in on these airplanes, but I had this idea that we would hire one of these Carnival cruise ships, one of these giant cruise ships, like the Queen Mary II or whatever, Queen Elizabeth II, whatever it's called.
There's massive ships.
Massive. What are they called when they cross the Atlantic?
Transatlantic?
Transatlantic boats, these ships. And 2,000 people, because that's about how many people leave America a year these days. So 2,000 people would pile onto this boat for a 2.5-week journey. And the iconic moment that I wanted to see is the Jewish people waving goodbye to Lady Liberty. As in thank you, but waving shalom going the other way.
So long and thanks for all the fish.
But with respect. With great respect.
With you. I mean, I was very committed to. I mean, one of the reasons that I spent 2 years working with at-risk youth in a wilderness therapy program in America is it was very important to me to leave on a note of kavod and hakarat hatov, of real gratitude and some payback. Mm-hmm. But it comes a time.
It comes a time. Maybe that time has come.
Speaking of which, time has come.
That time has come. We finish up this Torah portion with a kind of. It's not quite. It's kind of part one of the plagues.
Definitely.
And we will get back to this story next week's Torah portion in Bo, right? In the kind of climax of these 10 commandments, and then after
10 plagues.
10 plagues. That's right, 10 plagues, which lead to the splitting of the Red Sea, which lead to the 10 commandments, and we'll get to it in the book of Exodus. Rav Mike Feuer, I want to thank you again for joining me today. I also want to once again remember a great man who used Sheldon Adelson, who used the blessings that God gave him to bless the Jewish people, and I think therefore the world, to make Jerusalem and Israel stronger, and therefore the world a better place. Baruch, and may we have the power to use our welfare, our gifts, for the good of God's great story, which is what you share with us so well when you join us, Rav Mike Feuer. People can join you on your other website, which is ravmike.com and jewishstory.co. They'll find there your podcasts, including the Jewish Story podcast, and also they'll find there your spiritual guidance, your
spiritual counseling, or life counseling,
life counseling, which is very helpful to so many people, including myself. I'm not just a promoter; I'm also a client, and so if people can definitely join.
I got the reference.
Yeah, you know that one.
Yeah.
Very good.
See who gets it.
That's right. So if you're also a client, do me hashtag I'm also a client. And thank you, God, for the ability to broadcast live from Judea. I want to thank all the good people that are out there, including Michael and Anna Mary Lopez, friends of mine, who say Baruch Hashem, and other people talking a lot about very important issues. For example, Catherine, who talks about infragation, which is a very
serious issue.
Serious issue. You know what, Rav Mike? With this, I just want to say that this show is so fun, and I think that really people right now, there's a lot of that tension out there, and it's
heavy. It's a heavy time, man.
Yeah, it's a heavy time. Find Hashem. He's talking to us. Look for him in the Torah. Look for him in your life. Take a deep breath. Say hi to a random stranger.
Hold one another up.
That's it. Rav Mike Feuer, thank you so much for being with us, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. It's always a pleasure. Bye, Yishai.
All right, folks. God bless you, Rav Mike. Thank you so much for joining me. Lots of love from the land of Israel. Please write me an email, yishai@yishaifleisher.com or yishai@thelandofisrael.com. Check out the MP3 podcast that comes out. Just type in the Yishai Fleisher Show or Yishai Fleisher Israel Podcasts. Catherine says, please post a link to Rav Mike's website on your page. Yishai, Toda Rabba, Shabbat Shalom. I think I have one here. If I look for it in my banners, it's somewhere in here. Let's just wait for a second. Here it is. I found it. Bang. Rav Mike Feuer, that's jewishstory.co, and ravmike.com, and also Rabbi Yishai Fleischer, yishaifleischer.com. If you have any comments about the sound, the look, the topics, the things that you want more or less of, let me know. Please write me an email. I really appreciate hearing from you. It gives me a lot of strength. And Bichlal, in general, I just want to bless you right now. We all need great blessings. It is a special time. It is a time of transitions. And here, the rain is coming back, and I see the clouds rolling in. And so I know that it's a time also of blessings. With all these great challenges, with all these crises, there are opportunities to grow and to get better. I want to wish everybody lots of health from the COVID virus, and may either, the vaccine and in general Hashem's protection, the greatest vaccine of them all, may that reach you soon. So lots of blessings from the land of blessings, and lots of love, and shalom. If you're listening to the MP3, stay tuned because we got more great stuff on the way.